Hello and good morning. This is Jeff Nosanov, your host of the Space Madness podcast. So named because it's a maddening field to be in, and very few areas are as maddening as fundraising, public awareness, and outreach. So today we have with us a very special guest, Ken Ruffin. He's been a volunteer with the National Space Society for 15 years, and I just found out he has four different roles, four different titles. So rather than try to remember them, I'll have him please introduce himself and tell us about him.
First, Jeff, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be a guest here, and it's great to see you again. It's been
Likewise.
wow. I'm thinking it's been maybe 10 years or so,
Yeah,
give or
since
take.
a DARPA conference in Dallas in 2013. So wonderful to see you again.
12 years. Wow,
Yeah,
even longer
maybe.
than I guessed.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, it's been a minute. So as they say. So yeah, thanks again. Thanks for having me. And I'll talk about the National Space Society. It's a 1C3 nonprofit educational organization, which even though the first word in the name is national, it's actually an international
Hmm.
organization and always has been from its creation. And as far as its creation goes, it was a merger of two previous nonprofit organizations. There was the National Space Institute and the
Oh,
L5 Society, and those two organizations merged to form National Space Society. And L5 Society was an international organization since its founding back in 1975.
oh wow.
So there's a little bit of the history of that. Again, educational outreach, informing the public, people of all ages, not just rocket scientists. And my original major was aerospace engineering, so I'm fond of rocket scientists. But we want everyone
Hmm.
to be aware of, to be knowledgeable of, not just current missions and what's happening at this time and what's being planned, upcoming missions for NASA as well as for commercial spaceflight companies, but even more longer term, humanity's future in space,
Mhm.
space settlement. As much as that might sound like science fiction, it will actually, well, I was going to say it will become a reality, but we're approaching 25 years as of this moment.
Mhm.
Someone, at least one, actually at least two people, the continuous human
Mhm.
occupancy of the International Space Station.
Mhm.
So we're approaching the 25th anniversary, November 2nd, 2025 will make 25
Wow.
years. Yeah. So time flies. So
Yeah.
and we've known each other about half that time. How about that?
Yeah. So
So
what are your four roles at the society?
absolutely. So locally, I guess I'll go in order of
Mhm.
chronological order. I'm the president of the National Space Society of North Texas, and
Okay.
that's the chapter for the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, as we call it here, and
Mhm.
beyond. So not just the metro area, but people who may and actually do drive for hours from outside the metropolitan area
Uh,
itself occasionally will come to our meetings, and all are invited. We also have virtual members literally from across the United States and around the world.
well, you have me thinking of the dark skies out there in the middle of nowhere in North Texas.
Hmm.
Must be a great place to go stargazing.
Yeah, North Texas, West Texas in
Mhm.
particular, the further you go to the west, the drier the climate, the lower
Mhm.
the humidity, and the darker the skies. So yeah, yep, absolutely. So that's all a part of it. So locally, chapter president. Then on
Mhm.
the national level, three titles. I'm on the board of directors of the
Mhm.
National Space Society, and we're the people elected by NSS members to essentially run the organization, to
Mhm.
make changes that hopefully lead to various improvements, most small improvements, sometimes larger improvements. I'm also on the NSS Board of Advisors. And last but not least, I am an NSS Space Ambassador.
Okay.
And that title is reserved for NSS members who complete a certain minimum number of space presentations to audiences, whether they're in person or virtual. And I've been doing that for a few years now.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I enjoy doing that as well. It's especially talking to kids. And over the years, it's been very interesting to see what space knowledge and assumptions kids bring as time goes on and what they're taught changes and so on. So clearly you have a lifelong love of space exploration. So I'd love to know, where it started. Take me back. What do you remember as the moment when you knew, well, this is it. This is it for me.
It's crystal clear.
Hmm.
I was 8 years old watching
Hmm.
Star Trek, the original series, when all we
Okay.
called it was Star Trek because
Sure.
that was the
That
only
was it. Yeah.
series.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so this is going way back. And even though I knew I was watching a science fiction television series,
Mm.
I was wondering while watching each episode, as the Enterprise goes to a different planet, orbiting a different planet during almost every episode, I was wondering if those planets were real.
Hmm.
And, there was no way of knowing just from watching this science fiction series, are
Sure.
these real planets or not? My parents didn't know. My
Hmm.
teacher didn't know. But my teacher knew of another teacher in the school who was interested in space. So my teacher brought me to that teacher, and I'm going to say the space teacher. Uh,
Sure.
she she said that, well, that's just science fiction. Those planets in that show aren't real.
Mm.
We don't even know. And I'll have to just date myself here. This was the year 1974. We
Okay.
don't know if planets exist around other stars.
Wow.
And a light bulb went
Yeah.
off in my head. And I was thinking, well, if we don't know, if telescopes weren't powerful enough or
Mm.
advanced enough, I said, well, when I grow up, I'm going to start a company that will design and build spacecraft so
Awesome.
we can go to these stars to see if
Mm.
there are other planets. I'm still motivated by Star Trek.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
she smiles politely and says, well, we haven't even been to any planets in our own solar system yet.
Uh-huh.
So another light bulb goes off, and I said, well, if I can get us to a planet around another star, I know I can get us to Mars.
Sure.
Yeah. And from that moment on, I was 100% determined that
Mhm.
that is exactly what I was going to do. But now I've got to fast forward from age 8 to college. And
Well, I want to hear that, of course, but I want to pause
okay,
you for a moment because
sure.
you've raised such an interesting question of what do we teach 8-year-olds? And an 8-year-old now, well, when I started doing these talks at JPL in 2010, I would talk through the planets and then I would ask the kids, well, is that it? And that's partially me asking them an open-ended question to engage them, but also me genuinely curious, have these children learned about the exoplanets yet?
Right.
And
Good point.
and so it's like, oh, it's not 8 or 9 planets. It's at least 4,000 or whatever it is from Kepler that we know
Hmm.
of, and that, of course, essentially confirms there's trillions out
Right.
there.
Oh, yeah.
And and so I love that in one lifetime we went from 8 or 9 in I-74 before the Pluto stuff
Hmm.
to 5,000, and in all of human history you got maybe one new one every 1,000 years if you're lucky up
Hmm.
until the 19th century. And I think that of all the advances in our lifetime, that's just one that is very easy to overlook, that now we can teach children confidently, well, there's trillions, so that's pretty
Yeah.
good. But back to you. You're about to get to college and next steps for your journey.
Sure, sure. So just skipping ahead, majoring in aerospace engineering,
Mm.
and I was just as determined as an
Mm.
aerospace undergrad that I was going to grow up and start and build a company that was going to get us
Mm.
to Mars. And us, actually, specifically
Mm.
astronauts. I wasn't thinking in terms of
Mm.
space settlement, even though I was aware of space settlement because at this point I was already a student member of the L5
Oh, okay.
Society, one of those
Sure.
predecessor organizations. So there's a connection there.
So if you were 8 in 1974, then you would have been 18 in 1984. So the
Hmm.
shuttle was starting, and that must have been very exciting.
It was. It was exciting, and at the same time, I was also a little impatient
Mm.
because I saw the relatively limited television coverage of shuttle missions, of
Oh,
each
interesting.
launch, and even
Okay.
preparations, the glide tests for the landings, before the
Yeah.
first launch. Saw all of that, but at the same time, I've got some books behind me that you might
Hmm.
have noticed, and some of these books date back to like the year 1980-ish, like the year
Okay.
before the first shuttle launch. And some books, some magazines And at that time, what I was reading was that the shuttle, there were expected initially to have been 5 space shuttle orbiters.
Yep.
Each one was going to launch 10 times per year for a total of 50 launches per year.
Yeah, that
So,
would have been pretty useful, wouldn't it?
yes. So, and at that point, that I was in high school then, and I was anticipating 50 shuttle launches a year
Mm,
for, a decade,
mm,
and so that's 500 launches. So there would have been, based on what I was reading, there would have been not only a space station in low Earth orbit, but
mm.
there would have been space hotels, space telescopes, space factories,
Yep.
mining the moon, mining near Earth asteroids. I'm reading about um, this world, or this universe that still doesn't exist. And I'm reading about this now
Yeah.
45 years ago, and that's my foundation for,
Mm,
as an aerospace engineer. It's like all these things will be happening. It'll be easy for me to
mm,
have. I had also read about nuclear thermal propulsion. So
mm,
I'll start a company and design and build nuclear thermal propulsion vehicle to get
mm.
from Earth to Mars in half the time of
Yep.
chemical propulsion.
Yep.
So everything just seemed to be just, getting laid out, waiting for me. And then January 28th, 1986 happened. Space Shuttle Challenger explosion during my junior year in college, majoring in aerospace engineering.
Wow.
So not only was it, 7 lives lost, not only was it a $1 billion vehicle, and I don't know how many jobs were lost at that time, but mine, dreams, plans, goals, call it what you want, all went up in smoke with that liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen explosion.
Mm.
So I changed majors from aerospace engineering to mechanical, and of course, it just changed the direction of my life. But fortunately, by 2010, I had rediscovered the what was now the National Space Society, and the rest is history.
Well, I'm intrigued by the opportunity to hear from you about your sort of day-to-day experience in and around the Challenger explosion as a student. I mean, do you recall conversations? Do you recall, I imagine colleges might have been, the advisors might have been uncertain of what to tell people. I mean, it must have felt like all of these aerospace dreams were at a minimum decimated, if not eliminated. I mean, can you take me back there?
Nobody expects the answer that I'm about to give you. Every once in a while, I've
Okay.
had this conversation since then.
Uh-huh.
Although my major was aerospace engineering, and though
Mm,
I expected my fellow aerospace engineering students, I thought, well, maybe half might be interested in planes, half might be
mm,
interested in spacecraft.
sure.
To this day, to my knowledge, I was the only student, didn't matter if it was freshman, sophomore, junior,
Mhm.
senior, who was interested in spacecraft.
Mm,
Everybody else was interested in airplanes. And it's
interesting.
because of the university that I went to. And it's
Okay.
not a criticism of the
Sure.
university. I should say it's because of the university I chose. Had
Okay.
I gone to maybe Embry-Riddle, Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida, University of Alabama at Huntsville, had I gone
Mm,
to universities that were at least relatively near NASA's
sure.
locations, NASA centers, I probably would have been surrounded by people like me who were space advocates.
Sure. Sure.
But I went to North Carolina State University, and
Hmm.
aviation is huge in North
Fair.
Carolina.
Fair.
The what those students were saying was, we're near Raleigh-Durham Airport. It's just a
Sure.
few miles away. They were
Sure.
excited about Raleigh-Durham Airport. I was excited about Kennedy Space Center.
Mm.
Raleigh-Durham Airport was much, much closer.
You know, I like that point, and it reminds me of something I think of a lot. I mean, I understand why our organizations separate academic fields, chemistry and biology and physics, and why we separate aviation and space. Of course, fundamentally, they're all the same nature, right?
Hmm.
It's all the same stuff. I often like to think about how you have to fly through the air to get to space.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you need the aviation side, especially if you want to come back.
Yes,
That
that's
sure helps
important.
to consider the atmospheric flight part. So it's an interesting situation you described there. So you must have felt pretty alone there,
Yes.
kind of trying to figure out what does this mean for me. Everyone
Hmm.
else is like working on jet engines and stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
exactly. I felt pretty alone, but I had felt pretty alone my entire life leading up to then
fair
anyway.
enough.
So it was like, you know,
Yeah.
It was just more of
Well,
the same old, same old.
I have a similar academic story, which is that when I went, so my formal training is in law, and when I went to law school and started talking about space law, I
Hmm.
got a lot of
What?
curious stares, and I did convince several professors that it was real, and then they finally admitted, well, we really can't help you here, man. Go here's there looks like there's a book or two about it. Why don't you go get the book? And of course, that's not the only reason I went to law school, but that was disappointing is a wrong word. I had also felt like I was not quite alone, but figuring out my own path by myself. And so that's why when the Nebraska thing came on the map in 2008, the Nebraska Space Law Program, uh, which I've talked about on some other podcasts, and I was like, wow, well, that's it. Okay, fine, I'm going to do this. This will be my way in, and it was. So unique pathways, unexpected locations, part of the story, and that's part of what I want people to tell. I want people to understand through this podcast is that you don't. If you didn't do mechanical engineering or aerospace and engineering in college, there's still room for you in aerospace. So
Absolutely.
we need everything. We really need everything.
Yeah.
I mean, communications and media. We'll talk about that later. Certainly outreach, finance, all that stuff. So and I think a full career in aerospace, you're going to do it all anyway,
Hmm.
unless you limit yourself, which obviously I wouldn't encourage anyone to do. So,
Right.
okay, so your formal career, if I understand, is that you're in a public utility, right? Electric utility.
I was for the second half of my
Okay,
career,
okay,
but my entire career
mm,
was as an environmental engineer.
okay,
But I mean, you're still correct. So we'll start with the electric utility. I was working for the corporate office as an environmental engineer,
mm,
specializing in air quality for my entire
okay.
career.
Not an not
Excuse
an
me.
easy problem in Texas.
Well, I was in Texas, yeah, for again the second half of my career, but I've lived in the East Coast, West
Mm,
Coast for the first half. I worked
mm.
for, well, actually, Los Angeles is where I started. I was an air
Really?
quality inspector. Now, Los Angeles, certainly more so back then, because we're talking 1990, when I was hired, there
Uh,
was the discussion of smog
yeah.
in Los Angeles was much more common back then. I'd like to think jokingly that I had at least a small role in reducing the amount of the smog, and that's why it's
Well,
hardly ever discussed these days
I ha-
because of me.
I have to thank you for that because I grew up in Los Angeles. I was 8 years
You're
old in
kidding.
Los Angeles in 1990. What organization did you work for? Tell me it was DWP.
No, it
No,
was the
okay.
South Coast Air Quality Management
Okay.
District.
Okay.
And that's a mouthful. The
Yeah.
AQMD, Air Quality
Okay.
Management District, is often how it's referred to.
Okay.
And I was an air quality inspector.
Mm,
So I went to factories to
mm,
determine, just showed up unannounced inspections to
mm.
determine if they were following air quality rules and regulations.
Okay. Well, this is reminding me of a story at JPL. We were in I was in one of the buildings that faces the mountains.
Hmm.
And it's a beautiful view. And there was this guy there who I worked with who had been there since I want to say the early 60s. And this
Okay.
was 2012, 13. And I was looking out the window and he must have noticed and he said, "Did you know that when he started, their smog was so bad he couldn't see the mountain?"
Mountain. Yes.
And I don't know exactly how far away it was, but it couldn't have been more than half a mile.
Yeah.
Uh, and I just, despite growing up in LA, I could not imagine that. And so, thanks to you and your generation who cleaned up the air a bit.
Yeah. And you're welcome. And, like I said, I like to say it was because of me, but I mean, I was
Sure,
one person out of literally thousands,
sure.
and that was locally. And then, of course, there's the US EPA, and,
Mm.
they have their responsibilities as well. US EPA, not to make this an air quality
Sure.
conversation, but they have primary responsibility for vehicles,
Okay.
excuse me, which were a huge contributor to smog.
Sure.
And AQMD, the
Okay.
stationary sources, the
Uh,
factories and so on
okay.
and so forth. Factories, power plants, refineries.
Well,
So,
and California has recently supported the methane emission satellite that is now I guess carrying on that torch. Maybe that's a poor metaphor for a methane
I know what you mean, though.
situation, but carrying forward the effort of monitoring those stationary sources. So
Hmm.
so Good stuff. So
Yeah.
now at that time, were you also with the society as a volunteer, or is that before?
Oh, that was before. There was
Okay.
and I didn't say this from the time of the shuttle
Mm.
Challenger explosion. I was on a 24-year hiatus, I guess I could
Okay.
call it, where I told myself, "Hey,
Mm-hmm.
I'm done with space, or
Mm-hmm.
space is done with me, or something." I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I was in denial for 24
Okay.
years, and so
Okay.
this was during that time.
Sure.
Now, I said that, but if there was ever anything that just happened to come up on the news
Mm-hmm.
regarding a launch, I was 8 years old again. I mean, I was
Sure.
like totally glued to the TV for 60 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever
Yeah.
the case was.
Yeah, I can relate. I mean, my career has taken me away from space full time a handful of times, and it's always come back. And that kind of connects to the ebbs and flows of NASA and its priorities in those decades.
Hmm.
So let's fast forward then to when you rejoin the society.
Hmm.
Bring it forward to today, which is an interesting challenge. So what was the moment that brought you back to the society 24 years later?
So I saw online, and
Mm,
at this point I was already living in Texas. I was
mm,
relatively new, and I was doing searches. I mean, it wasn't just
mm.
random. I was doing searches for something space related in the Dallas area, and this
Okay.
was actually late 2009, like October 2009. And I came across an event at, I guess it's okay if I mention the specific location.
Sure. I mean, this was 16 years ago,
Yeah.
so
Okay. So it was the University of Texas at Arlington Planetarium. So
okay.
planetarium on a college campus, and someone was advertising an event. It turns out it was astronomy day,
Mm,
but someone was advertising something called Galilean Nights, and
okay.
as in Jupiter, Galileo,
Mm,
who discovered the four largest moons. Of course, you know this. So I've always found those four moons to be fascinating, not
mm,
necessarily as destinations for people to go to. Certainly
mm,
not the three closest moons to Jupiter. Callisto,
mm,
yeah, I think Callisto should be the next destination after Mars, but that's a different
mm,
topic.
mm,
So I thought, I want to go. I've never, because I'm a space travel fan or advocate. I've
mm.
never really been an astronomy fan.
Okay.
And I thought, I just want to go. It's something space related, even though it's
Sure.
astronomy, So had a family at that point. So I
Mm,
mentioned it and they were like, hey, we want to go too. So
cool.
we, loaded up in the car, drove to the campus, and there's several people outside with their own telescopes, all
Mm,
pointed at
mm,
Jupiter. And you could see at least three of the
mm,
four Galilean satellites, the four largest moons. So I happened to ask, one of these astronomers or amateur astronomers, I said, is there like anything going on inside? Like, yeah, there's a
mm.
guy in there with a table. He's got some stuff on it. So I go inside, meet the guy who's got the table with stuff on it. To make this long story short, he was the chapter president of the National Space Society
Okay.
of North Texas at that time. And he was telling me about the organization, and he was saying that they have monthly meetings and they
Mm,
come to places like this, this planetarium. They also go
mm,
to museums and libraries and schools and inform the public about space. And I said, this reminds me of the L5 Society that I was a member of, back in the
okay.
80s. And that's when he
Yeah.
told me about the merger,
Got it.
and I was like, I have found my way home, my emotional home.
Sure. Sure. You
So
found
that
your
was,
people again.
yes, actually,
Yeah.
not even again. I have to say this. As a
Uh,
student member of L5 Society, I
uh,
didn't know any other members at
uh,
all. I was
okay.
I was totally I have always been alone. I had always been
Uh,
in a little silo, a silo with just me my
mm,
entire life when it came to space, literally up until that moment. Because even in
wow.
college, again, at the
Yeah.
university, majoring in aerospace engineering, I'm the only space person.
Sure.
So 2010, I go to the chapter meeting, join the chapter. The following year, the guy who was chapter president at the time wanted to become the president, wanted to and did become president of the Moon Society, which is
Okay.
another similar, nonprofit organization, but of course dedicated to the moon. So I was encouraged by not just
Mm,
him, but all the members, at least all the active members at that point, to become the chapter president. And I've basically been, I can't say I've been president ever since, because there were three
Sure.
years when I wasn't. I was vice president. I had stepped down when I was first elected to, excuse me, sorry about that. Sorry about that again. When I was first elected to the board of directors on the national level in
Mm,
2016, I didn't know how much additional responsibility I might
sure.
have. So I became vice president actually for 3 1-year terms before
Hmm.
becoming president again. But even during the vice presidential years, I was still the primary speaker as
Sure.
far as giving presentations, whether it's at the museums, planetariums, libraries, schools,
Mm,
and then as the alternate speaker for our monthly chapter meetings.
okay. Yeah, and I've seen those posts online here and there, ever since. I love that you found that basically at a star party, right? And
Yes,
people had these
exactly.
telescopes, and to me, those experiences they really show you that when you take your attention off of everyday life, traffic and taxes and mortgage, and you look up for a while, especially in a group of people that I've always found to be intriguing and a little eccentric. Like,
Hmm.
I once was at a star party at the Griffith Observatory where someone backed up a pickup truck. He had actually built his own telescope into the bed of his pickup truck. Um,
Wow.
and it was really creative. Yeah, I mean, and it worked obviously, but it was a really creative way of creating a mobile, fairly high powered telescope. When you turn your attention up at the risk of being dramatic, I mean, you really see what matters to you.
Hmm.
And it seems like you were right in that exact mental state to walk in and say, right, this was it all along.
Hmm.
This, and I'm back. So I'd love to hear stories like that.
Yeah.
So obviously you've been heavily involved ever since then. So let's jump to a little more challenging topic of 2025.
Ah.
How do you, it's almost like one of those lines that says it's easy to be I don't know. It's easy work when everyone's behind you. There's a better metaphor than that, but I'm
I
blanking on it.
understand.
So how does the messaging work? How does the public engagement work in an environment like now when we don't even have the full support of the U.S. government, or at least not the way it used to be?
Well, I have been, and I don't know if it's apparent or not, I've been, for the most part, an optimist. I've had moments where it's like, I don't know if I'm an
Yeah.
optimist anymore or not. But overall, I've tended to believe that things will work out for the best, no
Mm,
matter how dark the times. And it doesn't matter if the topic is the federal government or, just day to day life,
mm,
being stuck in traffic. And I'm like trying to get somewhere at a certain time and I'm stuck in traffic.
yeah.
It's like it's going to work out. I'll get there eventually. So that's the attitude that I have been taking, with the proposed, federal government
Mm,
budget for the fiscal year 2026. And I have to confess, I actually
mm,
saw an article earlier this morning,
mm,
before I put on my headphones,
mm.
that it looks like Congress is pushing back against the White House's
Yes.
budget proposal, but still, it's still a process. I mean, that doesn't mean that NASA's funding will be completely restored.
Right. And if I could just interject there for the audience.
Sure.
So what you're referring to is, I believe it was a week ago Friday, there was a markup session on the budget, and the draconian cuts uh were objected to. My understanding is that it wasn't there wasn't a final output from the committee, but what they agreed on was only a $1 billion cut, not a $7 billion cut. But unfortunately, the final output of that committee, whatever form that is, did not occur because there was a debate about funding for relocating the FBI headquarters. So that's my understanding of where we are today on July 22nd.
Okay.
But it is still certainly better than just accepting the $7 or $8 billion cut, whatever it is that came from the administration. Back to
Absolutely.
you. Just wanted to, as far as I know, that's the current state of things
Hmm.
at time of recording.
Yeah, yeah, and that pretty much matches, what I've
Okay.
seen. you know, and it's still an ongoing process. I mean, the momentum has shifted, in a positive direction, as
Hmm.
you said, as of this moment, as of this morning on this day.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll see what the afternoon has in store.
Yes, we will.
The Senate is about to, essentially go on vacation. They're going to be out of session for
Yeah.
about a month or so. So time will tell. But to actually answer your question, again, because I call myself a practical optimist.
Hmm. I like that.
I look at the facts and I still tend to believe that things
Mm,
generally work out with positive outcomes more often than negative outcomes. In this situation, talking to the public,
mm,
I basically say that it's like, well, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. We know what's being
mm.
discussed. It's still to be determined, and the momentum seems to be going in a positive direction of maintaining at least the majority of the funding, as you
Sure.
said.
I mean, and that's fair. I mean, I feel myself torn between whatever it turns out to be, it will be. And it's, of course, happening at such a high level that it's hard to feel like one can make an impact.
Right.
But at the same time, obviously, that's not true. And we all
Mhm.
need to advocate for the things that are important to us. And I guess that gets back to the name of the podcast and the maddening nature of the challenge. I mean, space exploration requires due to its complexity, it requires a lot of organizations and systems working more or less well together. And there are ebbs and flows in that. So hopefully, what we're living through is a temporary ebb, whichever one of those is negative or
Yeah,
is
ebb,
lesser. Yeah.
ebb. That's right. I was
Yes.
thinking ebb, glitch.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are the
Yeah.
other?
And it's I wasn't around, but I'm aware that the 80s were also a relatively bleak time, even before the Challenger explosion for planetary exploration.
Hmm.
There were not a lot of planetary missions going. And in fact, I recently learned from someone who I really should have on the show, retired JPL project manager with 50 years of experience, that
Oh,
the Galileo mission, probably of personal interest to you, the
hmm.
Galileo mission was actually delayed by 6 years total
Yeah.
from its original launch, that was right around when I was born, when it was initially meant to be launched. But it was delayed for several reasons, including one of which that actually saved the mission. One delay was because of Challenger, of course, it being a shuttle launched mission, but
Hmm.
also apparently the thrusters on the vehicle had the mission not been delayed by Challenger, the thrusters would have failed, destroying the spacecraft, which itself was only revealed during a different mission that used the same thrusters from the same supplier that did fail. So it turns out that all of that actually led to the success of Galileo, which is not something you can plan on,
Right.
but in retrospect, it almost looks like it worked out. I mean, obviously it did, but
Hmm.
it wouldn't have looked like that I'm sure it didn't look like that at the time. So I guess that's
You're
the
right.
lesson. And I think that's what you're trying to say is things work out. And that, I suppose, that wisdom comes with having observed all of this for a long time.
Yeah, it comes with the gray hair, so
I'm getting there. I mean,
I,
I don't have any hair at all, but if I
well, I
did, it
don't
would
need
be
to on
gray.
top.
Yeah, it would be gray. Yet another probably consequence of the space exploration career.
Hmm.
But wouldn't have it any other way. So
If
okay,
I
so
if I may,
please,
another comment related to Galileo.
yeah.
Not even the intended mission, but another positive consequence that
Mm,
came about from that. And you're probably familiar with the high gain antenna
yeah.
on that probe not opening properly or partially opening, to be accurate.
Mm,
And because there was so much data, relatively
mm,
speaking, that was intended to be sent from the probe back to Earth,
mm,
the data couldn't be sent the traditional way. And
mm,
so data compression was used, zipping data
mm,
was used in order to be able to send data from the probe to Earth. And that technology, ever since, has been
mm.
used by cell phone companies
Oh,
so
really?
that, yeah, so that text message, because up until that time, a text message was just characters, it was just
Mm,
letters and numbers. That's it. You couldn't send any photos
mm,
until once they started using that zipping technology, and I hope
mm.
I'm saying it correctly, then
Compression.
yeah, data compression. So cell phones, in order to attach a picture, the
Uh,
same process is used. The data is compressed
huh.
to attach a photo, and now we can text photos,
So you're
all because
saying
of
that
Galileo.
not only did that come out of the mission, it came out of a near failure condition of the missions.
Yes.
So now I have in my back pocket that not that even a nearly failed mission can result in enormous technological advances, and in fact may have accelerated the development of that, even just because it was critical to get the mission to make the mission work at all. So thank
Absolutely.
you very much. Now I have that in my toolbox, that we can advance industries exponentially by failing
Yes.
in addition to succeeding. Now I wanted to point out for your interest that the official evaluation, and I only recently learned this, the official conclusion of the team at JPL that evaluated the antenna mechanical issue was because of the storage,
Mm-hmm.
there was some lubricant that wore out faster, and of course because of that extra time that wasn't planned, the mission succeeded at all, because otherwise the faulty thrusters would have been used.
Right.
But it had that problem anyway. So I guess the takeaway here is human ingenuity prevails.
Yes.
I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go
Absolutely.
with that.
Well said.
Yeah, and I think that's a wonderful moral of the story.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to talk about how you are doing some independent work now, building on your 15 years of extensive speaking and outreach. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Thank you. Extensive speaking and outreach. That's very well said. I have spoken to about 240 audiences through National
Mm,
Space Society. And if I know that's not something that I just memorize, I mean, I
sure,
haven't gone, okay, here's my first, here's my second. No,
sure.
every time I create a presentation,
Mm.
electronically, I have a folder and I just
Uh,
increase the number by one.
See, that's I wish I was that organized. I just do it whenever I can, and you know, look for the next one.
Yeah, I mean, I just sort of stumbled across that. I can't say it was a
Sure,
great master plan. You know, when I
sure,
was at presentation 3 and 4 and 5, I had no idea I would ever be at
sure.
240.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't see this coming at all. It just, hey, it worked out. Kind of like with the
Hmm.
Galileo mission, it just worked out for the better.
Yeah.
So, so with that experience, not
Mm,
just the number of presentations, but the thousands upon thousands of people in those audiences that I've
mm,
spoken to, that not only, you know, did I see that they were awake and enjoying, as far as I could tell, the presentation, but
mm,
the questions and comments that I would get during and after the
mm,
presentations. It's like, I don't know, in a way, that's kind of the best part. I mean, I'm like packing up and, you know, I've got to walk away either because
mm.
the event is over or somebody else is going to speak or whatever. You know, people are still coming up to me asking me questions and like walking me out of the room or,
Yeah, that's
and
the
so on and
best.
so forth. It's like, okay, so I did something right.
Mm,
So, I thoroughly enjoy that. I know it's time well spent. I mean, whether it's
mm,
my preparation time, you know, the actual giving of the presentation, all of it. I know
mm.
it's worth it. I know that I'm making a positive change, you know, at least one audience at a time.
Well,
So,
I don't want to interrupt you,
no,
but
that's
I
fine.
want to make the point that what I love so much about those events is the feeling that people, maybe for the first time ever, they're looking up and wondering about all this stuff,
Hmm.
and how hopefully how that's going to change the way they see the world forever, the way
Yes.
it did for us at a young age and set us on this crazy path. But go
Yeah.
on. But you're building on that.
Yeah, totally fine. This is, you know, audiences. My audiences are people of all ages. I mean, from elementary school students. My very first presentation one is the name of
Mm.
that folder, was for an astronomy club at an elementary school.
Cool.
So, you know, you can't get, you know, a much younger audience than that. And this is like third grade and up.
Mm.
So, and, you know, we're talking 15 years ago. So those students
Or in
not only have
college.
already
Yeah.
graduated high school, some of them have graduated college already.
Yeah.
And on Facebook, I'm actually Facebook friends with, I'm so sorry, I really should have
No,
some
no
water
worries.
right here. Facebook friends with the parent who was the organizer of this
Cool.
astronomy club 15 years
Yeah.
ago. So
Yeah.
she and I communicated just a few months ago, and she was talking about her son graduating college
Mm.
in aerospace engineering. And, you know, her son, who was the little boy, you
Yeah.
know, but that she had to say, hey, sit still. You can't run around in here, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
15 years ago. So it's amazing. But, uh,
So I want to get
yeah,
to
sure.
your current work, but I want
Right,
to
right.
add, have you ever given a talk at a nursing home?
Close.
Okay.
An assisted living center.
Okay. Yeah. I did that once, and it was the coolest thing because half the people had been there when Sputnik happened.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, wow, I shouldn't even, I should be sitting down. I want you to talk.
You
But
know,
yeah, so I highly recommend that for anyone who does space talks. And they love visitors and speakers because not a lot of people think about it.
you're right. You're absolutely right. So my experience was the same. Audience members who remember Sputnik,
Mm-hmm.
October 4th, 1957. And by their standards, a little more recently, the Mariner 4 mission,
Mm-hmm.
which is not something that's just commonly discussed, but it was the
Mm-hmm.
first successful robotic mission flyby of Mars.
Mm-hmm.
And it took the first up close and personal, I like to call it, photo of
Mm-hmm.
Mars, black and white photo. And with that photo, it was essentially determined that no, there's no advanced
Mm-hmm.
civilization on Mars. There are no cities, roads, highways, and that photo changed everything back in
Mm-hmm.
1965. We just had the 60th anniversary, actually, of that mission
Wow.
recently. I forgot if it was May or June, but fairly recently.
Well, do you know the story of how they got the data down and how that one of those first images was rendered?
I know that someone made a drawing
Yeah. Yeah.
approximating the colors.
Yeah, everyone should listening should look this up. But basically, it was faster to take the color data from the sensor that was coming down in raw data form. It was faster to draw that by hand with colored pencils on a chalkboard, or maybe it was chalk on a chalkboard, than to wait for the computer to do it. So there's an amazing story about that. But moving on to your current work,
Sure, sure.
as much as we could go off on these tangents forever.
You are so right. And I apologize for the tangent.
Mm.
So, but
No, I
yeah,
love it. That's
right. Okay. Okay, good. It's good that it's not a 15-minute interview. Otherwise,
yeah,
I'd be in
yeah.
trouble. So yeah, based on my experiences, whether it's at the assisted living center, the
Mm-hmm.
elementary school, and every age in between. So how about that for
Mm-hmm.
a segue?
Yep.
These audiences genuinely appreciate the information that I provide. And with students in particular, the younger students, a lot of times at the beginning of my presentation, excuse me, I see the looks on their faces where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, who is this guy? I don't know him. He's not an astronaut. I really don't want to be here. I'd rather be playing video games. They kind of have that look.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when I'm done, yeah, some of them still have that look, but others have their hands up and they're asking questions. Well, what about
Mm-hmm.
this and what about that? And I heard this and I saw that.
Yeah.
So to be able to reach, as far as I'm concerned, even one person,
Mm-hmm.
and ideally several, well,
Mm-hmm.
ideally everybody, but, that's a bit much. But, if I
Yeah.
can reach several audience members every time and just show them something different, maybe expand their thinking, expand their belief in
Mm-hmm.
possibilities of what could happen and what should happen, information that they're probably, it's not singling out anyone, but just in general, people just aren't getting this information unless they look for it.
Yeah.
People like us, we look for it.
Mm-hmm.
We want to know, but the general public, well, it's like what's going on with reality TV,
Yeah.
sports. I have nothing against sports at all. I'm a huge
Mm-hmm.
basketball fan. So whatever the case may be, is my car running like it's supposed to, and
Yeah.
on and on and
Yeah.
on and on. But my career. Okay. So based on my experiences again with these audiences and just being completely convinced there is a need for the
Mm-hmm.
general public to get this information, I tried to initially figure out if there is a way. There's got to be a way that I should be
Mm-hmm.
able to receive some sort of income, to have some sort of
Mm-hmm.
contract. But I should say, what would the source of revenue be? I
Sure.
don't want to charge the people sitting in the audience because, well,
Sure.
that's most likely not going to work out too well for me.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I wanted to charge $1 a person, some people will be happy to, others not so much. But
Sure.
what I thought was, well, because the space industry has a constantly growing number of companies, of
Mm-hmm.
people, whether they're building rockets, whether they're building satellites, whether they're building 3D printers in space, whether they're
Mm-hmm.
building space hotels, space stations, the list goes on and on and on. What if some of them, not necessarily all, but even a few of them, what if
Mm-hmm.
they wanted the public to understand and appreciate what it is that they're doing or what it is they're planning
Sure.
to do. So
Sure.
those are my prospective customers. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And if being able to contract with them, it's like those
Hmm.
companies that want their message spread.
Sure.
I see that as a win-win. I mean, that's a plus for the company, plus
Yeah.
the public gets to find out these things are happening, and here's what's happening now. Here's what they're planning to do.
Sure. And that's space PR in a nutshell,
Yeah,
built on your extensive experience. So how can these companies reach you to talk about this?
yeah. The quickest way currently is through my National Space Society email,
Okay.
Ken.Ruffin, Ruffin, F as in Frank, N as in Nancy, Ken.Ruffin at NSS, National Space Society.org. So
Okay. Great. And we'll
with
put
the
that
shirt
in
on is
the
probably the best way.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes.
Great.
So we've come to the present. I appreciate you telling me the whole story. Always, every single time, it's interesting and fascinating to see how people got to where they are. Any final thoughts for the audience that you'd like to share about yourself or space or the society? Anything you like.
Final thoughts. There's just so many options, so much to consider, so many things to look forward to. And through National Space Society, there's so many options, whether it's on the website, the quarterly
Mhm.
magazines, the email newsletters, so many ways to get up-to-date information in addition to any individual searches you might perform or other emails you might receive. Just be optimistic that things will be better in the future. It may not be Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek future, but I do firmly believe things will be better, and space will be a big part of that.
I really love that thought to end on today. And the universe has been waiting for us to explore it for 13 billion years,
Mm,
and we're just getting started. So
absolutely.
I want to thank Ken Ruffin for joining me today on the Space Madness podcast. This is Jeff Nossanov, your host, and we'll see you next time.